politics too often divide us. Now is the time to remember that we are all fellow citizens. We are one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. They're destroying our country.
Happy Sunday and welcome to The Deal. I'm your host, Ed Clark. It is Sunday, July 21st, 2024. So happy you decided to join us. Listen, every week I was utterly amazed and stunned at what happens in American politics, primarily because Donald Trump was elected president once back in 2016. That is the genesis of a lot of our political turmoil. Not that, the country was, some utopia with everybody getting along, but Donald Trump is a special kind of crazy. And to help me talk about how crazy Donald Trump is our favorite political science professor, Val Atkinson. Hey, Val.
Hello, Ed. Let's talk. We got a good one today.
Well, listen, Val, I had to muster all my strength to watch the Republican convention. And, the usual suspects were there. Mark Robinson and the Trump boys and, Byron Donalds. And they did try out a lot of colored people, Amber Rose, to talk. And I heard, Val, that this year they actually had a reception for Black Republicans, and it was the first one anyone could remember. And apparently it was well attended. Byron Donalds and the gang, were there shaking hands and trying to get people to join the movement. But overall, I thought the convention was a bit of a mess because you try to get to the culmination of the event, which is the speech by the nominee, right, which is supposed to be this crescendo, this big thing. But all the stuff in between wasn't a kind of crescendo moment because, one, the assassination attempt last weekend, and also I think everybody knows who they have in the form of their nominee. So let me backtrack. What was your assessment of the convention? Did you watch any of it other than the major speeches? And what did you think they were trying to accomplish there?
Well, going into the convention, I wanted to see if Donald Trump was going to sort of keep his semi-pledge of making it a softer toned type of delivery as opposed to all the prickly stuff that he's been used to doing. And he tried for a moment or two, but he couldn't he couldn't resist getting back into the old Donald Trump of talking about Pelosi and Biden and Harris and giving them nicknames and this. I thought one time, well, maybe his teleprompter is broken. And that's the reason he's going back into the old Trump. But after a while, I just felt that this was the comfort level he had become accustomed to. And that's who he is. And he's not going to do anything else, regardless of what the speechwriters put out there in front of him. So he knows that he's uncomfortable reading. He knows that every word that's given to him is not something that he would prefer. So he goes off the reservation from time to time. He says crazy stuff. So that nixed all of that about the softer Trump. I said, okay, we're through with that. The next thing I was interested in was his VP pick, J.D. Vance. I did a little research and I didn't find a lot. I said, well, maybe they're going to tell me something that I don't know as to the reasoning and why he was chosen. And then I began to get a lot of pings coming back at me saying, well, the guy that introduced J.D. Vance to Donald Trump is the same guy that's been giving a lot of money to Donald Trump and J.D. Vance way back when J.D. Vance was a nothing and had written a book that he himself now doesn't really understand. But at any rate, I said, well, maybe money has something to do with this, why he chose J.D. Vance. Because Trump, if he's not susceptible to anything, he is susceptible to big dollars. And, you know, for a billion here, a billion there, you can get Trump to do anything.
Yeah.
And it's no telling. And he doesn't care where it comes from. I mean, it can come from Russia, Saudi Arabia. It can come from people right here in the United States of America. He doesn't care. Just give him that money. It can come from NATO, whatever. I mean, this guy has a button that is always in the on position that is taking money from other people. He'll do that. That's how you control this guy. It's the only way you can control him. And I said maybe that has something to do with his taking of J.D. Vance, because I didn't see anything else, Ed, in J.D.'s background that said that he would be a great partner for Donald Trump in terms of touching on some demographics that the Republican Party has had difficulty with over the years, such as Black and brown people, such as suburban women, those things that Republicans may have a lot of problems with in the upcoming election. But J.D. Vance fails in all those categories as well, if not worse than Trump.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to figure why this guy. He's 38 years old, or will be soon. He has time in the military, I think, as an enlisted man, not as a military officer.
The Marine Corps, yeah, enlisted. Yeah.
In the Marine Corps, and he just has nothing. There's no there. You know, I'm saying.
Well, there is one thing that's there, Val, and I want you to talk about this. This is J.D. Vance calling Donald Trump Hitler.
I'm a never Trump guy. I never liked him. It makes you think that at a fundamental level, this is sort of a he said, she said, right? And at the end of the day, do you believe Donald Trump, who always tells the truth? Just kidding. Or do you believe that woman on that tape?
I cannot stand Trump because I think he's a fraud. Well, I think he's a total fraud that is exploiting these people, who is a total fraud.
Like you said, I agree with you on Trump because I don't think that he's the person. I don't think he actually cares about folks.
So as a conservative who thinks that Trump does not have the answers and isn't qualified to be president, what are you going to do this election, if you don't mind saying?
My current plan is to vote either third party, or as I joke to my wife, I might write in my dog, because that's about as good as it seems. But, you know, I think there's a chance, if I feel like Trump has a really good chance of winning, that I might have to hold my nose and vote for Hillary Clinton. Ultimately, I think I'll probably vote third party. I might vote for this new guy who I really like, Evan McMullin, who I actually met the other day. But I think that I'm going to vote third party because I can't stomach Trump. I think that he's noxious and is leading the white working class to a very dark place.
That's the other thing. You know, that's the punchline. He felt that Donald Trump was America's Hitler. He saw nothing but bad things out of Donald Trump and the Republican Party. And some kind of way he does a 180 and comes up and says, no, Donald Trump is the best thing. He's the best thing since sliced bread. All of that stuff I said before is wrong. And now I'm on the right track. Well, okay, are you going to give him kudos? You're going to give him some credit for changing his mind? If so, the question becomes, can he change his mind again? Go back the other way, you know? Nothing sticks to me and say, oh, that's the reason they chose J.D. Vance. It is crazy. It is really crazy and complicated. And maybe we all will find out at some point. But I'm glad that I can't figure it out, because that means it's not obvious to anybody else either.
Yeah. I want to remind you, you're listening to The Deal, or you're watching it on the video podcast, or you're listening on the Spotify or wherever you get your podcast. Please have people know about us, join, subscribe, so you don't miss an episode. Well, here's the thing that I thought about J.D. Vance. You know, I'm in the tech space, and J.D. Vance used to be in that space. He's one of those Silicon Valley bros because after he got out of the Marine Corps, he became one of the few people in his family because in his book Hillbilly Elegy and the movie, it's about how dysfunctional everybody is in Appalachia. He was actually critical of his family, the welfare queens in Appalachia. In his family, he was very critical of those folks. He became a venture capitalist and started hanging out with people like Peter Thiel, who it has donated plenty of money to people like Donald Trump. And Peter Thiel was also a compatriot of one Elon Musk. And I think that what JD Vance brings is, like you said, the money, because Elon Musk has pledged to do $45 million a month until the election. Well, he does that because he knows JD Vance. And I'm pretty sure Peter Thiel and Elon Musk said, you know, Donald Trump, we'll help you out, but you got to have one of our people. Or Donald Trump made the calculation, you know, if we put one of their people, then they'll give the money. That's my speculation on it. I don't know. You know, I wasn't in the room. I can't tell you, you know, how the decision was made, but I think it was an interesting decision. I don't see what the upside is because it doesn't bring him anything other than money, because the unwashed that are the hardcore MAGA who don't think highly about people who go to Yale, right? Which is where people like Peter Thiel and JD Vance are. He doesn't bring them along either, because he talked junk about him. Not only did he talk junk about Donald Trump, again, he talked junk about his own family. He said they were on methamphetamines and they were alcoholics and they were on welfare and so on and so forth. And that's why people in Appalachia weren't making it. So anyway, I digress. I want to talk about one other person before we get back to talking about Donald Trump and his monstrosity of a speech. I have a clip I want you to look at. This is Tim Scott, and then I want to talk about it.
If you didn't believe in miracles before Saturday, you better be believing right now. Thank God Almighty that we live in a country that still believes in the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords, the Alpha and the Omega. And our God still saves, he still delivers, and he still sets free. Because on Saturday, the devil came to Pennsylvania holding a rifle, but an American lion got back up on his feet and he roared. Oh yeah, he roared.
Foul. He tried to do the black preacher, and he said that the Lord God Almighty spared Donald Trump. That God reached down and protected Donald Trump. But he let the Corey comparator get killed, I guess. Right? Yeah. I guess the Lord said, well, we'll take one. Right. Spare me Trump. What do you? We've talked about Tim Scott enough here, so everybody knows where we are on Tim Scott. What is this? And I don't even think people even believe it who say it, but the nonsense about God and Donald Trump. How do we get those two things linked together, Val?
Well, the thing about it is these Republicans, particularly African-American Republicans, they've gotten to a different level of communication. They don't care if you don't believe what they're saying. As a matter of fact, it's almost good if you don't. They'll just keep saying it anyway. Give the opposition something to talk about while they're moving on to strategy B. Okay, we're still back here arguing about strategy A. they really don't care about those things that Donald Trump is doing or has done or can do. The only thing that works with or against these guys, Ed, if you get a guy like a Tim Scott, ask him sometimes, and I know you're going to get the chance to do this when you talk to him next, ask him what in the Republican platform really is going to resonate with Black voters to make them support a Donald Trump ticket. What do they have? What are Republicans claiming that they are going to do for Black and brown people? Stop them from coming in on the border? Take away student loan? Get rid of DEI? Is that what he's going to do for them? Maybe get rid of the 13th Amendment? You know, what is he going to do for this group of people? What are you selling that this is the reason that they should support a Donald Trump for president ticket? I really don't understand. And they never let you get them in a position to even ask that question because they're talking about other things, even lies, to get you upset and train your attention on things that are stupid and shouldn't even bear the attention that it's getting because they control the narrative and they say things that get us upset. They say things that are off the line of target here. And we don't get to ask them the main question. What is it that Donald Trump and his minions are going to do for Black folks? Enumerate them. Tell me what they are. Ask them those kind of questions. Nobody in the media asks these questions. They want to know, has Donald Trump called you about being the VP? Okay, you got to get another question now because that's JD's platform.
It's done now.
That's done, okay? What is going to be another question you're going to ask? Stupid question that he's going to, give a crazy answer to. But getting back to your original point about the Bible and God and this kind of thing and how Trump is using this to get over on people is that he knows that his evangelical base considers that kind of talk red meat. And that's all he needs to do is to give them red meat every now and then. Whether it's true or not doesn't have a damn thing to do with it, is it? Truth don't have anything to do with it except if you're a Democrat, because that's the first line of importance to you is whether it's true or not. That's way down the list of issues as far as Republicans are concerned. The first thing in their line of progression is it successful? Is it effective? Being truthful don't have a damn thing to do with it.
Don't have anything to do with it. But you know what, Val? I hear some music in my ear. That means we need to take a break. When we come back, we're going to finish up talking about the Republican convention and Donald Trump's speech, or whatever you want to call it. Then we want to talk about the problems over on the Democratic side, and then also what we know about the would-be assassin, and all those and much more when we come back. Stay right there. We'll be right back after this message.
Even the mighty might not see it coming. It's prediabetes, and it captures 1 in 3 adults. But you can escape. Take the 1-minute prediabetes risk test to know where you stand and prevent or delay type 2 diabetes. Be your own hero on smartphones everywhere at doihaveprediabetes.org.
President Biden is expected to spend the weekend recovering from COVID at his home in Rehoboth Beach. The list of congressional Democrats calling for the president to end his campaign now stands at 35. On Friday, Ohio Senator Sherrod Brown added his name to that tally.
And sadly, we begin with breaking news of the most difficult kind. In the last few minutes, we have learned that Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee has died.
Last month, she announced she had been battling pancreatic cancer. Her family releasing a statement tonight. It reads in part, quote, her legislative victories impacted millions, from establishing the Juneteenth federal holiday to reauthorizing the Violence Against Women Act. However, she impacted us most as our beloved wife, sister, mother, and BB, grandmother. She will be dearly missed, but her legacy will continue to inspire all who believe in freedom, justice, and democracy. Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee was 74 years old.
The Congresswoman was born January 12, 1950 in Queens, New York. She was elected to the U.S. House of Representatives in 1995. She served in the Houston City Council from 1989 to 1994 and then ran for Houston mayor in 2023. Truly a loss for our Houston community tonight, the greater community, and the nation.
And welcome back to our second segment of the deal. I'm your host, Ed Clark. That's Val Atkinson. It's Sunday, July 21st, 2024. Before we get started back talking about Donald Trump and also Joe Biden and his travails, I do have to mention Sheila Jackson Lee. She passed away from pancreatic cancer yesterday. Had served a long time in the Congress representing the Houston area. I've actually had a chance to work with her, Val, when I was at FEMA. She would come down during Hurricane Ike and also during Hurricane Katrina when I was with FEMA, and I would have a chance to be around her. She fought very hard for her constituents, and when people had to come from New Orleans to Houston, she tried to make sure they were taken care of it. Then later on, when Barack Obama was president during Hurricane Ike, Galveston was devastated. And she made sure those folks, even though they weren't in her district in Galveston, the people in Galveston were actually represented by somebody who did not care at all, Congressman Ron Paul, who did not believe in taking any aid at all. So Sheila Jackson Lee had to advocate for those people. So I was in a number of meetings with her and had a chance to interact with her. It's a sad occasion, but it goes to a point, Val, as we talk about the election and who represents us and all that stuff, about passing the torch. She'd been around a long time, and she had some challengers, but nobody could ever get close. And we have something a little bit analogous here. Alma Adams doesn't ever really have any challengers that gets close. For a long time, David Price did, and so on and so forth. You can go down the list. There's some people that have been in Congress 30, 40, even 50 years almost. Talk to me real quick, because you've also been on that side of it, running campaigns and all that kind of stuff. How do we get people to emerge as the next line of leader? Because we talked already that money is a big factor in this.
Well, one of the first things you got to have, Ed, is trust. And you've got to start giving your underlings, hate to use that word, you got to give them a sense of responsibility. You got to give them some really tangible types of things that are theirs and theirs alone to take care of, so they can start building a case for themselves, so they can have this standalone, so that when it's time for them to rise up, first of all, nobody's going to say, well, who's Ed Clark? Second of all, they shouldn't say, what can he do? What has he done? And it should be a smooth, almost seamless transition right into that next thing. The problem that we have, especially on the Black side of this equation, is we have too many older folk who don't have anything going for themselves, Ed, outside of the position that they hold in politics or in community leadership. And they want to hold on to that particular position for as long as they can. So they see these younger people that they should be training as a threat to what they're doing, and they don't bring them on. They don't give them the type of things that they need so that they can be successful when their time comes up. And then when it comes up in an untimely fashion, like a death or whatever, then people begin to say, well, who's going to take the torch now? But, well, you got a problem, because it should have been easy to identify while the person was still doing their job. And I'm not trying to impugn anybody, particularly Congressperson Lee. But the thing about it is we have got to start doing a better job at training and identifying and preparing our next in lines to take over and do the kind of things that we are doing as incumbents. We just got to do a better job.
Yeah, you're absolutely right about that. Because despite the fact that you're on here every week and you can hold a conversation, because we're going to talk about somebody that they claim can't hold a conversation in a little bit, and are fully engaged and knows what's going on. Just wrote another book on the subject, very deep book, the important book that people need to read. You just finished that. So clearly you're engaged and know what's going on. But leadership is another thing, and the energy to be out on the stump and also be out in the community and meet people and so on and so forth. That takes, some young legs, right? To be constantly on the move. Not that I don't know what constitutes too long in Congress, but people constantly talk about term limits or imposing some sort of restriction on age or whatever, blah blah blah. We never do it. We just talk about it. Nothing ever happens. And then we also have these young people. I just did air quotes for the ones who can't see the video. These young people who are supposedly disaffected and don't want to be participants in politics, but they're not participants in politics. Because if they were, some of them would have been running already, right? So it's almost like they think that you can't run. Well, if you got something to say, then run. I don't care if Sheila Jackson Lee or Alma Adams is the congressperson. If you think that you could do a better job, run on the issues. But if they're doing something for you and it seems to be effective, then they don't. And a lot of times in those districts where there's Black representation, it's a legacy, right? They're in there for a long time, and then they die, and their husband or wife takes over, or their son and daughter takes over.
Right.
And that can't be tenable, especially in Black districts where it's vitally important that you do have some young new blood, and yada yada yada. I digress, though. Sheila Jackson Lee, God rest her soul, again, very dedicated a person to her district, and like I said, every time I had an interaction with her, it was positive, and I wish only the best for her family. So that brings us back to what we were talking about, which was the Republican convention and the shit show that it was, because here is Donald Trump doing his usual.
These are flooded with illegal aliens. Americans are being squeezed out of the labor force and their jobs are taken. By the way, you know who's taking the jobs that are created? 107% of those jobs are taken by illegal aliens. And you know who's being hurt the most by millions of people pouring into our country? The Black population and the Hispanic population, because they're taking the jobs from our Black population, our Hispanic population, and they're also taking them from unions. The unions are suffering because of it.
So, Val, the first 10, 15 minutes, you mentioned this in the first segment. We thought maybe he would be contrite with his Band-Aid on his ear, and he was thankful for his life being spared, blah, 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 blah. But then we get standard issue Trump that could have been any rally, and 107% of jobs for Black people are being taken by immigrants. You just heard that. He said 107% of jobs. Val, what the hell is 107% of jobs? So every time I hear this thing about how bad Joe Biden is, which we will talk about because there are some issues, how the hell can anybody with a straight face tell me what we just heard there makes any sense?
It can't. It doesn't make sense at all. But you know, when people have already made up their mind, they go out cherry picking and trying to find things that suits what the position that they've already come up with. So they let that go. Now, if Biden would have said that, I mean, the media would have been talking about that for the next 2 weeks. It'd have been the top headline because that's what we want to talk about. But Trump, this guy's 77 years old, Ed, just about 78. He's only 3 years behind Joe Biden. And he talks about things that are untrue the majority of the time, because if he had to stick with the truth, he would have very little to say. And that's his strategy to do that. And he doesn't care if we get off the chart in terms of our dispositions and all this other stuff against him. That's what he wants done. This guy is a con man par excellence. I mean, the greatest con man that there has ever been in politics, in my opinion. I don't know of another one that's been even close to this guy.
Yeah.
He wouldn't have been anything near as successful trying to take over the Democratic Party as he did with the Republican Party. And that's saying something about Republicans. This guy felt that yours was the easiest party to commandeer. And he did that. He took over your entire party. We won't count the number of people, high-ranking people that were not there during this convention, Ed, that we talked about, starting with Romney and the Bushes and the Cheneys and all up and down the line. They didn't even show up because they didn't want to be tainted with this stuff. This cult guy has taken over an entire party, just took it over. And he got the dollars to back him because what he tells people like Lindsey Graham and Mitch McConnell is, I know you're teetering, but you can go over and be a never Trumper all you want. But I can tell you this, your dollar donations for your campaign will dry up. There will never be another penny given to you and your campaign to do anything, not only to you, to people you know and other things you like. We're going to come after you with all we got. And they start saying, oh my goodness, that means my wife's social program is gone. My kids may not be able to get into Harvard, right? You know, and I can't ever run another campaign.
Yeah.
So I better leave this guy alone.
Well, I'm glad you brought up Mitch McConnell and Lindsey Graham. You're right, you know, and the Romneys and all these other people who were party stalwarts for decades. They were not part of the program. You had Marjorie Taylor Greene and the child molester Matt Gaetz and those kind of people, you know, featured. Peter Navarro got out of jail and came straight to the convention.
And don't forget about the Hulk.
Yeah, Hulk Hogan. So to me, it was a shit show. And it was also, when you look at the numbers, one of the lowest viewed conventions in memory. And so as we swing over and talk about the Democrats, because they got to do something in the next few weeks, Val. Their convention is coming up. And the problem they have is that apparently some people don't want Joe Biden to be the nominee. Now, I don't know what you do in the short time you have left. One of my concerns is that if you go to the convention, and we talked about this off mic a little bit before we came on, if you go to the convention and you have this brokered convention where you have multiple rounds of voting and all that stuff, we know in the past that's happened, but that was before TV and before all the other stuff, before people actually campaigned in primaries, when, you know, you'd go to 50 ballots to try to figure out who was going to be the nominee of the party, right? and there were smoke-filled rooms and guys with cigars, and women didn't vote and Negroes didn't vote, whatever. The Democratic Party is full of Negroes and women, and so people who might have the most influence, the money, the donor class, are probably still majority white men, Val. So, and then super delegates that you got to contend with, right? People who have an extra vote that can put their finger on the scale for somebody. And you're talking to people. What have you heard in terms of what's likely to happen in a few weeks when they go to their convention? Is there going to be a brokered convention? Is there anything that can be done between now and then? And why has Barack Obama not said anything? Those are two very loaded questions, but give me an answer.
Barack Obama is he's looking at the other side of this whole conundrum here. And he wants to come out the other side without having lost any face to anybody about anything. That's why he's playing the middle of the road as much as he can. Joe Biden was his vice president. It appears that the Congressional Black Caucus and everybody else that's black is still on the side of Joe Biden. So he doesn't want to get on the wrong side of that. So that's why he's not doing anything. He's talking middle of the road kind of language here. He doesn't want to get on to either side. But what Democrats in general want to do is they want Joe Biden to voluntarily get out of the race to endorse Kamala Harris, to do everything possible so that there won't be any question about who the standard bearer is going to be, to avoid any kind of conflict at the convention itself. That's the last thing they want. They can't survive a brokered convention. So that's what they're hoping happens. They don't want to try to go get him because it gets real messy. And I know you're going to talk about this later about what are the rules in a brokered convention? How do you do this? The superdelegates, what do they have? And the more complicated it gets, the messier it gets, the worse it is for Democrats in November. And it's just no win if it gets to that point. So the only way out of this thing is for Joe Biden to say, I'm pulling out, I'm putting all my money and everything behind Kamala Harris, and I want you guys to do the same thing. I'm going to still be president until January the 20th of next year, and and go right down the line. That's what they're hoping, and their strategy for getting to that point is just the slow drip of person after person coming up almost on a daily basis saying, we have another congressman, we have another Democratic stalwart or whatever, now supporting Joe Biden's ouster from the campaign. And they're hoping that this drip will get to Joe Biden in a way that he'll say, okay, I'm going to leave. There is no Barry Goldwater here that can walk up to Richard Nixon and say, hey, it's time to go. You only got 5 votes in the Senate and neither one of them is mine. That's not going to happen. Even with Barack Obama, it's not going to happen because first of all, Barack is not going to do it. Second of all, Joe Biden would see that as such a betrayal that he may rail against it and decide not to anyway, Yeah. It's a conundrum. It's a big problem. How it ends is anybody's guess. Short of Joe Biden's voluntary exit, it's a big problem that won't be resolved.
Well, guess what? We don't have an answer, and I hear some music. So we're going to take a break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about the convention rules and what might happen and how this might go down. And then we'll wrap up with the latest information on the shooter, the would-be assassin, the person who killed Corey Comparator, and that and a bunch more. So stay right there. We'll be right back after this message.
When it comes to making plans, you are the best. The same way you plan each detail for those moments, start planning to protect you and your loved ones from a natural disaster. Protecting your family is the best plan you can make.
Thomas Crooks flew a drone, a commercially available drone, over the site, which perhaps could have helped him plan his attack. Now, it's not clear if drones and aircraft were banned or prohibited over the site, which is often the case. Our guests can clarify that further. So we don't know if it somehow violated a ban over there, but they do now believe that he flew this drone over the site. And then combine that with the fact that he also, they've also looked at his phone now. Investigators have been able to search through all sorts of links on his phone. And that does not still provide a motive. The motive is still something elusive. But investigators did see that he searched information about the mass school shooting in Michigan at Oxford High School that a teenager carried out there, as we all know.
Ethan Crumley.
He also was, and he also did research on explosive materials, devices, improvised explosive devices. So more details emerging here and more questions really unanswered about the security for that rally.
Hey, welcome back to our third and final segment of Connections. I'm your host, Ed Clark. And that's Val Atkinson. We're trying to save the world today, like we always do when we come on. Val, there always seems to be a crisis since the guy came down the escalator. I don't want to overblow Donald Trump because we talk about this too, Val, a lot. That the problem isn't only Donald Trump. It is Trumpism, and what has become Trumpism is this call towards a fascist dictator type leader for certain people in America, which has always been around. At the very beginning of the country, people were fighting over whether or not they should have some sort of monarch or somebody who had a lot of power. And if you hear the recent Supreme Court decision, they damn near affirmed that. That this person in the form of the president can do whatever the hell they want. And then there's almost no way to hold them into account. Well, if that's the case, I suppose Joe Biden could, just do whatever he wants to, but he's not, because that's not his way he governs. So we're stuck with making this choice, Val. And the choice is between right now, as of July 21st, 2024, between Donald Trump and Joe Biden, because Joe Biden went through a primary process on the Democratic side, just like Donald Trump did on the Republican side. And Joe Biden ended up with the most votes because hardly anybody ran against him. So he has the most delegates. I'm looking here at Washington Post, and I would, if you can do it, I recommend people do it. In the Sunday edition of the Post, they have a section called How Democrats Would Pick a New Candidate If Biden Drops Out by Bonnie Berkowitz, Zeus Chin, and Adriano Blanco. They posted it at 6 a.m. this morning on Sunday. And they talk about the Democrats, Val, had said that they were going to do a virtual vote. Because, why go through the roll call and all that BS like the Republicans did? From the great state of North Carolina, our 52 votes go for blah, 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 blah. Well, what's the point, right? Because Joe Biden won. However, here's the scenario they paint. Biden declares that he's not going to run. He's going to decide to drop out. The next thing that happens is he could either say, Vice President Harris, I want you to have all my delegates, and then it's her. Or he doesn't endorse her, which I think would be suicide for the party
Mhm.
It certainly wouldn't help Biden if he drops out and doesn't endorse Vice President Harris. And then what you do is you try to come together and say, everybody hug in public at the convention starting on August the 19th and have a big kumbaya. Barack comes by, Nancy Pelosi comes by, Schumer comes by, Adam Schiff comes by. Everybody gets together and hugs each other, right? And then we're done.
Mhm.
But that would have to happen in the next few days, Val.
Yes.
So I don't think that's going to happen. So let's just say we play out that scenario that Harris is the pick. Let's do that one first. And then we'll talk about the broker convention. Who does Harris pick? Now, I've been saying for the longest time, I got it on tape, that I thought Roy Cooper was the most logical choice as the next National Democratic leader. And the reason for that is the governor of Maryland is a brother and he's too young, right? Gavin Newsom loves to be in Hollywood. I'm not sure he wants to leave California. Gretchen Whitmer got problems in Michigan that I don't think she wants to be on the national stage like that. And then Klobuchar, there's a couple other names. But Roy Cooper is the only one that has legislative experience, attorney general, governor, and he's friends of Joe Biden. And apparently Vice President Harris, because she was here again, and he was hanging out with her in Greensboro the other day. So Val, you know Roy Cooper. We both know Roy Cooper. We've spent time with him on our other program. We've seen him in social settings. We've seen him around Raleigh for the longest time. Is it possible that there's people's yard signs are going to change from Biden Harris to Harris Cooper?
Very possible. I think it's highly possible. First of all, let's go through some of those names that you just rattled off there and why I think they can't be a part of a Harris ticket. They couldn't be because the powers that be knows that the American electorate is not ready for an all-female presidency and vice president. You can't, that's not going to happen. The American electorate is not ready for an all-black ticket. So that would get rid of Whitmer and Moore right off the bat. That ain't going to happen. And you said the Hollywood guy out there, I don't think he's about this. I don't think that Newsom is that much electable in middle America. Out there in Hollywood, his nice flowing locks give him a few more points. The way he talks in rhyme and reason makes him sound hip, but that don't work in Arkansas. You know, that doesn't work necessarily in Ohio, you know, and some places in Pennsylvania. He's not a good choice. Roy Cooper, great choice. Battleground state, you listed all of the great things, legislative, attorney general, governor, those kinds of things, highly supportive of the Biden-Harris ticket, articulate, and he happens to be a white male. He is the guy. I can't think of anyone right now that would supplant him. I can't go so far as to say that he is number one. He would be number one in Kamala's eyes, but he would definitely, in my opinion, be on her short list. Definitely be on the short list. So we would have to see what happens going forward. But I think your assessment all along, Ed, has been 100% right on target, that it would be Roy Cooper. And my assessment that it would be, he would be on the short list with a very good chance at being her VP pick, if in fact it goes this way, that Biden decides not to run and he endorses Kamala, and there's no brokered convention and everything runs smooth. I think that's the way it would go.
Yeah, because otherwise they're shooting themselves in the foot. So here's the second part. So Joe Biden waits another week, hasn't made up his mind, but then you get some people openly calling for him not to be the nominee. And so there is no nominee on day one of the convention. How that would work, Val, is what they call an open convention. And if there is no nominee, they would ask for the delegates to put in names. To appear on the first ballot, you have to have 300 people nominate you out of the superdelegates and the delegates. So there's around 4,000 people that have votes, and you need to get 300. So potentially there would be a number of people that would show up on that first ballot. Vice President Harris for sure would be on that ballot. And Roy Cooper may even be on that ballot, on the first ballot, right? If it's completely open. And maybe even somebody, what the fever dream of the right wing would be, Michelle Obama, because they've been saying all along that Joe Biden was going to not run and Michelle Obama was going to replace him. They've been saying that for the last 2 years. So then a first ballot happens and those pledged delegates vote. And then there's no majority, so they go to a second ballot and subsequent ballots after that until somebody emerges as the nominee. If there is an open convention, Val, how many, and I know this is complete speculation, but how many rounds of balloting would it take for people just to go, these people, hey, I ain't voting for nobody? I think if you got beyond 2 ballots, you have just screwed yourself royally, and you know there's no recovering from this. Do you have any sort of sense of what that number would be in terms of rounds before the Democrats would be completely screwed?
No, because I don't think the Democrats are that stupid to let themselves get that far down in the weeds that they have to make a decision like that. I think somebody's going to get to Biden and tell him, look, you're not going to make it. We're in a different fucking space and time here now, okay? And where we are now, Mr. Biden, is we're talking about your legacy. Are you going to be the guy who allowed the entire party to go up in smoke, go down in flames, however you want to say it? Or are you going to try to save us and give us the best chance to win without you, which is with Kamala Harris, without a brokered convention? That's our best chance to win. Are you going to help us in that? Or are you going to stick around and make sure we have absolutely no chance at winning because we had to go to an open convention? And once they put it to him that way, I think some of his fans, some of his even family may say, Joe, let's reconsider. Maybe even Barack may say, hey, look, we can't do this, because it's gotten to the point now, it's beyond whether you can win or not. We know you can if everything was going the right way. But now we're talking about the destruction of the party. We're talking about, even beyond that, the destruction of your legacy with all the great things you've done in the last 4 years. That will be just wiped away because you destroyed the party because of your stubbornness. So, you know, you may not win, you may have to walk out, but at least keep your legacy intact. And I think he'll listen to that.
Well, I hope so. What the last part of this, Val, before we wrap up with the would-be assassin of Donald Trump and the latest news on that. Here's a piece of history. I know you remember this. 1924. There were 103 rounds, Val, to choose John Davis. You remember President Davis? No, we do not remember President Davis because he lost to Calvin Coolidge because the Democrats went to the convention, didn't have a clear-cut nominee. It took 103 rounds. And then they still hadn't really settled. And then the other guy just said, well, forget it. 103, that's enough. He was a compromise candidate. He withdrew. Davis goes on to get beaten by Calvin Coolidge. So none of us remember that. I hope none of us remember 2024 being a brokered convention. In my heart of hearts, if Joe Biden is capable and able to get through, I'd rather for it to stay the same. Then we don't have to make new yard signs. If he really needs to go, then it needs to be Harris Cooper. I'm going to go on record and say that's where I'm putting all my money, and I'd like for it to be that. And then hopefully, that will be how it ends up. Okay, let's end up on the last part of this, which is there was an assassination attempt, and we know that the assassin doesn't appear to have any political ideology, right? There's been no clear-cut political ideology that's been expressed by this person. As a matter of fact, he was in a gun club. It was his father's gun. And he did a lot of planning, Val. He had a ladder, he had a drone, all of that. And a lot of the criticism has been on the Secret Service. However, local people were standing there watching this guy do what he did. I think there's plenty enough blame to go around. And again, I'm going to frame all of this by saying nobody should be assassinating nobody. Period. Point blank. Let's get that on the table. But what part do the local authorities have in this? Because I see a lot of flaws, and I see a lot of local authorities standing around watching this guy do all kind of stuff that I know a colored person never would have been able to do.
Well, I'll tell you, when it's all said and done on this thing, Ed, I think it's going to be a sad day for our lady friends in the Secret Service. I believe that the director of the Secret Service is a female right now. I think that's going to change. And I think that having females in dominant, high-profile positions may get a second take or look going forward here. And I hate to say that, but that's the way things happen here. They want to make changes to the way things are. Hopefully that'll mean that it won't happen again. But in the long run, you've got to have some more details about your process and procedures here. It seems to me that it was unclear. A lot of people were unclear whose responsibility it was on the outlying building. Was it the Secret Service? Was it local police? And if so, exactly whom? And how do they report information from that group or from outside sources? These were regular civilians that were trying to tell people there's a guy up on the roof. What are you going to do about it? How do you process and manage that type of information? Where does it go and who acts? There's just too many questions, too many problems, and now is the time to fix it. Fortunately, the Mr. Crooks was not successful. And now that he was not successful in what he was trying to do, let's use this opportunity to make so that the next Mr. Crooks that comes along will be even less successful. Won't even get a chance to fire off a round, And you got to make some changes. So I expect to see some really substantial changes in the Secret Service, the way they do things, how it's run, and who runs it, coming up real soon. And I hate to say that I think you're going to have a smaller number of females in high-ranking positions in the Secret Service once this is all over.
I will not disagree with you on that. I think that's going to happen, Val. And I did hear the one last piece on that. The chairman of the committee that's going to hold a hearing tomorrow, he did say, and I thought it was good. He's a Republican. He said that by all appearances, this was not organized, group attack, whatever, blah, blah, blah. He even went on to acknowledge that the kid was a Republican and the family was libertarian, so on and so forth, to dispel some of that stuff that had been going around, trying to paint the picture that this was some sort of Democratic plot to get rid of Donald Trump, which the left doesn't tend to do that. Anyway, we squandered a whole hour of your time. So Val, anything you want to wrap up with? Anything we need to know, or anything you're working on? Anything you need to tell us?
Well, I'm reading another book that I think is very appropriate for where we are right now, and it's called The War Before the War, and it's by Andrew Del Blanco. Great book. And it talks about how things led up to the Civil War, the first Civil War. They always make sure they emphasize first how things and what were the things that led to the first Civil War. And the analogies are striking. So if you get a chance, pick up that book. It's called The War Before the War by Andrew Del Blanco. And it's been highly endorsed by Eric Foner, who wrote Reconstruction, the Bible on Reconstruction. It's been endorsed by Henry Louis Gates. It's been endorsed by several people who've written a lot of really high-profile things out there, high-profile pieces of literature about this particular subject. So I would encourage you to pick up that book if you get a chance.
Well, Val, I plan on missing the second Civil War. So let's hope that does not happen while I'm still around, because I don't want to be a part of it. Anyway, folks, again, thank you so much for joining us this week. Make sure you subscribe. That way you never have to try to track us down. All you got to do is go out to Spotify, any of those platforms, find the dealwithedclark.com. You can get the RSS feed from there. You can go to YouTube. You can go to Facebook. There's a whole bunch of different ways to get us. We've been growing the audience, Val. We've had some programs where I'm just surprised at the number of people who show up. A lot of people don't have nice things to say about us, but that's okay, because we do not say nice things about some other people. But that's fine. I want everybody to come. I want people to also realize that our opinions come from informed position, that we're just not saying stuff like some other folks. We do not want to foment violence. We want this to be peaceful, and we also want people, though, to tell the truth. So that's what we try to do here. Anyway, go out and do something good for somebody today. That's all I ever ask you to do, and we'll see you next time for another edition of The Deal. Bye.